Welcome, everybody who's back. This is our second session for the ORMAP Parcel Fabric training. It is Tuesday, February 9th, 2023, and it is 8 a.m. in Oregon. By the way, I've been taught by my daughter-in-law how to pronounce it, and I don't remember whether I do it right, whether it's Oregon or Oregon. So we'll see. Excuse me if I'm saying it incorrectly. All right, so Oregon. So yesterday we went over our first session. We had 4 hours, and we went over a lot of details, even though we didn't cover a whole lot of slides, but there was a lot of discussion in there about it. So we introduced this concept that we're going to start today called homework, in which we talk about some of the things we discussed, some of the things I might have shown you. And so we're going to go through that. And as I said, the rules are everyone has to go and give at least one thing that they learned up until this point. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about the parcel fabric, could be about ArcGIS Pro, could be about anything. And that the number 2 rule is that you may not repeat one which has already been discussed. All right. So who shall we start with? With whom shall we start? Who wants to go first?
I'll go. I'll be the guinea pig.
Okay. Please identify yourself. All right.
This is Mike from DOR.
Okay. Mike, go ahead.
The one thing that I took away from is when you have to do your cleaning and topology, you actually cannot use the error inspector, which is what I love to use to clean all my topologies. But I can't use that no more.
Well,
I have to go.
Let me clarify that. Okay. And I was concerned that it might have come across that you can't use topology. No, you can use topology in the parcel fabric. However, you want to be aware that you cannot use all of the topology fixes that are available in the error inspector.
Okay.
Okay. So that the fixes that you can use are the delete fixes, the extend and snap trim fixes. Those are acceptable. However, the rule says that you have to have a point on the end of a line, that you have to have lines that are on the boundaries of the parcel, those sorts of things, so that when you have a violation of a rule that says you're missing something and the topology inspector says, do you want me to fix this? So you say, go ahead, create the feature. You cannot create the feature in the topology inspector. That
Okay.
fix does not work because it does not record a record against it.
Got it.
So it then violates more rules in there. So just want to make sure it's not that you can't use topology, but you just have to be really careful when you go to fix the errors that are appearing on there. As I demonstrated yesterday, if you have a dangle, if you have something that's out there that's not supposed to be part of a parcel, you can delete it. That's fine. However, just be aware that all those topology rules aren't going to fix all your problems, because things like points, there is no rule that says a point has to be on a feature. So that you may wind up with errand points out there that you're going to have to manually go out and delete because it doesn't appear as a topology error. So again, you can't fully rely upon that. You're still going to have to rely upon the knowledge of the parcel fabric topology rules and how you do it. So that's really what I was trying to say.
Okay.
Good. All right, who's next?
Robert, also from DOR. I like that I could still use the functionality of the 10 key on the keyboard for input.
Yes, for the Traverse tool, by far, please, that's one of the learned skills that you definitely will wind up learning on here. Good point. Next.
Frank, this is Brent with Douglas County.
Okay.
Frank, I found that helpful to realize being able to see that an active record is also a feature class. And then since I'm pretty new to Parcel Fabric, that helps me look at it and to know that also.
Right. And good point. And as you use the Parcel Fabric more and more, you'll begin to understand how important records are, and to sort of the way it's supposed to work. Again, as cartographers, it might be minimized slightly, but the actual Parcel Fabric and the way it's working and trying to keep track of these land records, the record is important, very important on there. It's a good point. Next.
I'll go next, Wendy.
Okay.
All right. I wanted to carry on with the Traverse tool. I do love being able to keep my one hand over here, not having to tab, not having to change over to a curve. That's wonderful. But what I was looking forward to asking about was I have trouble with the close, adding a close point. So maybe you can demonstrate that at some point.
Thank you. Yes, I'm actually, I wasn't through with the Traverse tool. So we are going to talk about closures, and we're going to talk about closed traverses and open traverses and how you go and do that and actually go and demonstrate that for you. All right.
Thank you.
Good point. Yeah. Next.
Hi, this is Ivan.
All right.
I was just really aware of that when you're using the administrative boundaries check on adding, if you are adding other non-entities into the Parcel Fabric.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
how, like you pointed on, if you're using the a large district boundaries and stuff, that it'll look to build within those areas too that probably aren't needing to look at when you're doing the rebuild.
really, thank you for catching that. And the reality is, what I want you to go and do is understand that. Think about whether or not you really want to include these quote administrative boundaries inside the Parcel Fabric, or just include them in your project. Because the reality is, for something to be in the Parcel Fabric, all right, first of all, it has to have lines defining the boundaries of it, because that's one of the requirements of a parcel is lines on it. All right. So first thing you have to ask is this thing defined by lines? Land use, ESNs and police zones? No, they're really not defined by lines. Secondly, think about the fact that the Parcel Fabric is intending to go and make sure that topologically the structure is valid. But if your feature class is really nothing more than polygons, the tools that you use to edit and make sure that these things are in a line, they are not Parcel Fabric tools. They are regular ArcGIS Pro tools. So it's just there's unseen consequences for thinking, oh, you have to put everything into the Parcel Fabric, and that's not true. You can leave it outside and still perfectly maintain it. So yeah, they're good points. Thank you, Ivan.
This is Elise at DOR.
Yes, Elise.
I found it helpful you showing the various methods for keying in the traverse bearings. So I learned something that was going to be quicker for me.
Yeah, it's I am constantly looking for more efficient ways of doing things. I know some of my team said, no, you're just lazy. That's all. I don't want to do extra work unless I have to absolutely do it. So if I can find a way to even just save one keystroke, I'm going to go in and use that. And I continually test, how can I make this more efficient in what I'm doing? So yes, by all means, it's a great way to go and do it. And once you get used to it, you recognize how much more efficient it is, how much more efficiently you can put things in.
So this
Good,
is
thank you.
Bryce with Harney County.
Yes,
I didn't realize like the tax lot line feature class that the historic lines remain in the feature class if you delete a line. So a lot of times like
is.
we'll push out the polygon tax lot polygons out to different departments, and so we have to go in and
Yeah, if it's in the parcel fabric, you do want to be aware that just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. The parcel fabric table of contents actually still contains it, because the parcel fabric is attempting to start tracking historic elements on there.
So does that
you
only
can,
pertain if it's a record? Do you manage something outside of a record?
if you manage something outside of a record and you delete something, it's gone. It is gone.
So for like cleanup, you could do it outside of a record and not have that historic
Correct.
jumble.
Correct. Yep. Exactly right.
And
Good.
this is Viola Goodberg here. So that actually leads me to mine. I know, like, when we talk about historic versus regular points, I didn't realize how much of the data and how much of the parcel fabric stuff is actually driven by definition queries.
Oh,
And
everything.
I
Yes.
think, yeah, and the tiny one that I picked out that I thought was really interesting was like the show only records. That's also a definition query. It's a definition query that's driven by the record global ID. And that was like, oh, hey, that's wild. So it's an interesting way that they sort of concocted the ability to sort of derive a lot of these tools and do all that work. It's all driven by definition queries. And I just think that's a really cool way and really inventive way to be able to handle that.
So let me go and show you this. By the way, I'm using 3 today, 3.0 today is what I'm using. And on here, if I have an active record here and start editing, and if I go in here and say show only records, all right, in my active record, and I don't know where they are, but I'll see them. So if I only show the current records in here, if I go to my definition queries now, look at this. They're hiding it in 3. It's still working. It's still doing it, but they're not showing you that that's what it is. It was in 2.9 that you actually could see that, in
That's
fact,
interesting.
there was a definition query set that was going and working that way. It is interesting. I think they are doing a disservice. However, I can tell you from experience, I had a client that had show only active records on, and they crashed on the server. It was not, their web services crashed. They brought it back in and they could never see any of the other features. Even though they had turned this off, it was gone, because the definition queries had retained, and we had to reset every single feature class in there to not have that query for just that global ID. So they've transitioned slightly from 2.9 into 3 as far as what they expose to you, but they're still kind of doing it the same way. They're just not
I
showing
actually
you.
like that, Frank. I do a lot of manipulation with the definition queries, and it's relatively easy in a programmatic environment to mess with that one. And I'm glad it's gone. It always, it's so much faster to go in and not have that complicated. Because as you were saying, you can't mess with, if you mess it up, because you before in 2.9, you can go in and delete it. And
Yeah.
it's gone. And then you have to go, well, what did I just do? And remake it. So I actually I'm pretty glad they don't show it. That's cool.
Yeah.
Makes me happy.
Yeah. Perfect. So thank you, Dean. The perfect timing coming in also. So we're still going through the homework. So who else wants to come next?
This
Hey
is
there,
Jeff, Carroll
um,
County. I'm sorry.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Jeff with Washington County. When we initially set up our data model, we had a parcel in the parcel fabric for condos.
Yep.
And we ended up removing it because we decided we weren't sure we wanted it in there or needed it in there. And I was curious about this in 3.1, you said something about they're
Yep.
adding a condo feature class, which we've now discovered that we probably need it. We've done condos different ways multiple ways over the last 40 years. And so we kind of need to clean that up.
It's so yeah, so if you get a chance, and let me see if I can get, so if you get a chance, yesterday there was actually a meetup for the Parcel Fabric team, and in that meetup, let me pull it up here.
While you're getting there, Frank, Jeff, get a hold of John at Clackamas. John is going to be looking at 3.1 and a new design based on what Frank's going to show. And because there are some new things in 3.1 that are pretty cool. And I think Clackamas is also looking at a redesign. I wouldn't be surprised if Nick up in Multnomah is. So my hope is those three folks are going to do some magic that will work for you all. We don't use condos in Polk, so but there's some fun stuff. So
at yesterday's meetup, all right, there was in fact a meetup that had to do with 3.1 and what's new in 3.1. And if you don't mind, let me go and just real quickly go in here and here we go. So just to show you, basically, they are building condos, and those condo units, there's actually a new attribute field. I'm not going to take up all the time in here. Just be aware, though, they demonstrated it yesterday, and in fact, it is a here we go here. It's not necessarily that you have to have this new parcel type called condos, because they were demonstrating it on parcels, on tax parcels.
Oh,
so it's just a way to go and begin to move towards 2.5D, eventually to 3D, but 2.5D, where you can begin adding some attribution to your features, to your parcels, so that they can be extruded and viewed in 3 dimensions. All right, 2.5 dimensions anyway on there. It's a really nice addition. There's still some components you want to work, but it is the next iteration to begin to allow us to go and map in 3D and start modeling things. Again, not for producing tax maps, but for modeling the individual units. I can tell you down here in South Florida, we have several counties that are already thinking of doing this and experimenting with it in it. And as I was mentioning to beforehand, we've down here in South Florida, we have a lot of condos. Palm Beach County has 640,000 tax parcels. and about 280,000 of them are condominiums, 3D condos. So they are now looking to go and map this in 3D. They previously have gone through iterations of just doing a one-to-many where they were mapping the common element, and that common element was linking over to multiple condo records. And then they went into putting points in there to represent the units. They went from that to going and taking the building polygon and duplicating that vertically. And now they're actually looking at mapping the individual units and assigning floor levels to use that for extrusion so that they can actually begin doing evaluations about views and sort of different strata of value for these condominiums. So it's a big thing here in Florida as far as these three-dimensional cadasters. And it is 3.1 is this first iteration of, yeah, we're going to start storing attribution that can be used for this extrusion. Yeah.
Okay,
Good one. Yeah.
thank you.
But it doesn't require a new parcel type. You can add that to any of them. The interesting thing about it, and again, hopefully you go out and you view it. By the way, the reason why it wouldn't let me do it on my virtual machine is because I've not signed in and logged into the meetup ID, whereas on my other machine it was. But the interesting thing is that they're recognizing that it's not just the polygons that have to be enabled with this 3D, but the lines. Because as
Okay.
you move up the different floors, you have different configurations of the units, and you want the lines to be related to those units, not lines on top of all over the place, but you want them to be related to those polygons as far as what floor they're on. So it is polygon feature class and the line feature class inside there will have a new, I think they call it level or floor level or something like that is the new attribution on it.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
good. Thank you. Good point for discussion. Who else? Scott, you got your,
Steve,
got-
Umatilla County. And I
Okay,
wanted to make the comment that it was good to hear the accuracy differences in entering curves in the traverse using the central angle when the radius is less than 200 feet versus using the chord link or arc link when the radius is greater than 200 feet.
yeah, I would extend that out to maybe, 500-600 feet. But yeah, it's something that only surveyors care about, but it sort of explains why you have all of these rounding errors sort of constantly coming in when you're looking at subdivisions. The fact that in a subdivision, the distances are always rounded. So if you start accumulating those roundings, you recognize you're not going to get exactly what's on there. And it's better in a subdivision to go and use the radius and the center angle or the delta angle versus using the curve distance, or excuse me, the arc length distance or the chord distance on there. Yeah. Good. I'm glad you caught that. Good. All right. Who else?
Well, I'll go. Scott from Lincoln County.
Scott.
Yeah. I've been playing around with the Traverse tool over the past couple of months and had problems with curves. I mean, I could do the chord and everything, but using the central angle and the other methods I was having trouble with until yesterday. So yesterday afternoon, we have a new plat. I put it into our data set with this, and it's got curves and it's got reverse curves and it's got compound curves, and everything worked great until I got to the spiral curve.
Oh, Scott. Yes. Let me go and show you, because the parcel fabric does include the way to go and input spiral curves.
Okay.
Thank you. I will give you that one right after we go over the Traverse. Thank you, Scott. Yeah. And I see that Brittany from Columbia County just put something in the chat window. Her thing that she learned is not one definite way to run or set up a parcel fabric. I was wondering though, does the attribute table update the meets and bounds if a parcel is traversed in by deed and the feature is then moved to the fabric? Oh my gosh, I love it. So Brittany, I'm looking, yeah, that's a great one. I am going to talk about that. That was one of the next things up in the Traverse discussion. Thank you. Thank you for that. Who else?
This is
Who else
Robin.
did Yes, Robin.
Mine's more of a question than a learn, although I am happy to see that inputting in Traverse is still the same way as we used to do it in desktop, because that's the way I've done it for 30 years. But I have users that input, that are surveyors, that use different programs. Can that quadrant bearing syntax be changed at all? Can it be customized to a different format than degree, minute, seconds, quadrant bearing? The way that my surveyor does it in his program is quadrant bearing, degree, minute, seconds. I know it's minor, but it's all in trying to make the end user happy.
Yeah, I will talk about what can be accepted and not accepted. But as far as putting the input into ArcGIS Pro, no, there's no way yet that you could modify between those. You can't add a different format in there yet.
Okay, that was really my question.
Yeah,
I didn't know if we could come up with some coding or something that would make it
not
easier.
not that I'm aware of.
Well, he'll just have to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right, who do we have left?
All right, this is Andy at Clackamas County. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
Andy.
Hi, the thing I liked seeing yesterday is how once a parcel is created, if an arc gets deleted, it can be restored easily. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yes, so it can be recreated by using the parcel fabric build component of it. Be aware though that it doesn't necessarily mean that the COGO values are going to be restored.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so it will create a line, but it doesn't necessarily populate the COGO values. So we're going to have a long discussion about that pretty soon here.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Good question. Daniel, you're
Hey there.
I think
I didn't realize how sort of modular the parcel fabric was going to be, and how I kind of came into this thinking it was going to be a lot more structured than it is. And I realized you would be able to fit it into your needs a lot easier.
It is that is probably one of the most misunderstood, is that when Esri talks about the parcel fabric, they talk about it as one big solid thing. And the reality is no, it is extremely flexible, both in how it's defined and how it's implemented. I can share with you, we've had clients, for example, that because of the flexibility, the one that I'm hoping they're going to be publishing a story on soon, Waukesha County in Wisconsin, big county, all right, and they have 5 different municipalities that all want to go and maintain their parcels. Previously, they actually had to have 5 different parcel fabrics that somebody at the county was responsible for going and aggregating together into one single sort of aggregated parcels when they published it. Well, we started looking at the flexibility of the parcel fabric, and we recognized that why not put it in one fabric, but go and restrict by the user those 5 municipalities so that they could only work on their components of the parcel fabric, and they would have free access. They could do it anytime they want, but that everything else would be according to the user that they logged in, and it would only allow them to work on the portion of the county that they were authorized to do. That was one of the flexibilities. The second one is the fact that they had this sort of cadastral elements, and then they had the public land survey system. And the public land survey system in this county is maintained by the survey department, not by the parcel mappers. So we actually broke and pulled out and extracted the PLSS, created a parcel fabric for the survey department, and they maintain all the accurate PLSS information. And then the parcel data, which all relates to it, that gets maintained by the parcel mappers. And so that they are both protected from one another, yet they go and still reference those other things. And as something changes on one, they're notified that it goes and gets changed on the other. So there's a lot of flexibility in the design. And I think Dean was trying to go and really reinforce that it's not just one design. You, as the individual organization, have a lot of flexibility, and that may be overwhelming initially, but you have the flexibility to decide how you want to implement this once you understand what it really is. And that's why Dean asked me to start explaining what this really is, because it's not one big holistic, this is all it is, and you either accept it or you don't. No, there's benefits to just doing one part or doing all of it or whatever. Yeah, Danny, good point. Thank you.
So this is Robin again. I'm going to
Yes.
follow up on that question or that comment. Is what, because it looks like Washita County, I can't even say it.
Waukesha.
Thank you, Waukesha County is limiting access spatially. So each jurisdiction has their own piece that they can edit. Can that
Nope.
be?
It is actually doing it according to the attribution. So it's not necessarily spatial. There's the individual features, but yes, it is.
But can that concept be layers as well, or feature classes as well? Can one department have access to edit?
It can be
layers?
done. It's a little bit more complex, but yes, in fact, it can be done.
Okay.
It can
Because
be
I'm
done
looking at
because
bringing our surveyor on and having him maintain the parcels, whereas I'll maintain the tax lots. Does that make sense?
and that's you want to. Yes, it does make sense. It makes perfect sense. You only want those people who are authorized to actually edit and maintain the data to go and access it and do it.
Okay.
There's different approaches to it as far as how to do it, but you want to really think this through. Dean, you want to add something?
Yeah, Robin, with your stuff, what I would do is bring back in the old control and the lots and blocks. And so there would be essentially a plat survey feature type
Right.
that you could have some of that information in, and whether that's one parcel type or two, that would depend on what you're doing. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think with your stuff, with your surveyor, that'd be pretty neat.
Yeah, because when you do that, can you have simultaneous editing? Or does it need to be?
If you were going to set it up with branch versioning, as we've discussed, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because
In fact,
eventually
if
that's
you-
probably what we'll do when we push it into enterprise.
Yeah. And in fact, when you set it up as branch versioning, you can have two people editing the same parcel type.
Yeah.
And there's a whole resolution process if they by chance overlap. So there's, yeah, that's another class.
All right,
And
let's
just sort of, yeah, sorry, Robin.
No, go ahead.
To build on that, the permissions are much more granular inside of here than they ever were inside the client server implementation in ORMAP. All right, so that you can say that this person has the ability to edit certain things, because with Arcade and with the privileges, you actually set who gets access to certain components of it. You can go to that level. You could just make it, everybody that has access to Fabric does it, but you also can set it at a much more granular level.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, good. Good point.
Hey, Frank, Robert from DOR, how does that work with the reconciliation between the different units there as they bring everything back together then?
Want to make sure I understand the question. So you're talking about
Well, you said there's 5 departments there
yes.
that are maintaining that area. So as one department works on one thing, they're going to bring it, their stuff is going to come back into the
Nope.
whole,
Nope.
right?
It
It's
is
gonna,
it is maintained
well, it's,
in a
well,
whole.
it's maintained in a whole. So
Right.
if, as they do the work, somebody else says, wait a minute, I don't like how this flows. It doesn't flow with mine. I mean, there's going to be hits and misses there.
So there
always.
is in fact, just sort of to go a little bit deeper into that, there are the municipal boundaries. Those municipal boundaries define what features actually they have access to and what they could modify and not modify. So if they don't have access to rights to it, they don't have the ability to go and edit, they can't go and impact anything outside what they're allowed to go and edit. All right, so there is in fact a limit to what they can edit on there. And that's basically the municipal boundaries. They're locked out of everything else. Matter of fact, they
Okay,
don't even.
I'm just wondering how that would work. I mean, are you talking like road right of ways, or are you talking like sewer pipes, right? You know, I mean, if you have 2 road right of ways that come up on a boundary and one says we're 2 feet north and this one says we're 2 feet south, they won't line up because the boundary's in, right? I mean, what kind of reconciliation would you have there?
So a couple things, okay. This is only land records. This is the parcel fabric. This is only land records. So that it's whether or not a parcel gets moved or how it gets adjusted on there. All right. And they are allowed to adjust the parcel, but they're not allowed to adjust anything else. Utility lines, road center lines, those are all outside the parcel fabric and they have their own privileges set on them. So this is purely the land records that are part of this parcel fabric as far as how we've set this up on here. So there isn't a lot of conflicts that happen unless once there's an annexation, the county administrators of the parcel fabric, they have the ability to adjust what lands and what records are inside each municipality as you go around. So there's a higher level of authority which is allowed to go and make the adjustments on what these lower levels can go and edit and maintain and change on there.
Okay,
Does that help?
thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anybody else? I'm going to start calling. Tim, go ahead.
Hi, Frank. Tim with Benton County. I am new to all this, so I learned that you should not just drag individual sublayers from the parcel fabric into the table of contents.
Perfect. That's a good one. That's one that if somebody implements the parcel fabric on their own, that's usually one of the first mistakes they make. And it's like, well, this doesn't work. Why is it not coming in correct? Because you have to take the parcel fabric object and load that in when you're doing that. And that is, in fact, inside here. This has to be dragged into a new map, and then it'll go and take its standard type of symbology on here. So if I would go and right click and say add this to a new map, it actually will add it to a new map and create all of the standard symbology and grouping and labeling and everything else on there for me. Yeah. Nice, good one. Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So what you'll see is that in the project file that you guys all have that we gave you, it is not set up this way in the table of contents. And that was done on purpose in that the design committee elected to keep it as close as looking like it was in ArcMap. And that a lot of folks wanted the option to run things in Pro without Fabric or with Fabric. So we ended up doing a compromise. So the table of contents, if you're going to go full Fabric, I'm not sure I would use the table of contents that comes with the sample data set. And again, in the ORMAP tool structure, what we were trying to do is the most common that everyone would use. And in that particular case, we rode the fence. You could use that, the project file and the table of contents, whether you were fully implementing Parcel Fabric or not. And like I say, it could be organized better if you were going to do everything in Fabric with, for example, if you had multiple parcel types, putting subdivisions and lots and so forth. It would be cleaner to have it organized differently.
Good point. And matter of fact, if you see it here, you see I actually have two maps. This is sort of the Parcel Fabric centric map that I created to help me to work and explain the way the Parcel Fabric works. This other one here, this ORMAP configuration map, this is the way Dean has set it up for the cartographers. And again, I'm not a cartographer, so I don't pay attention to that sometimes. So, all right, we got a couple more, and so I'm just going to go down the list there. Denise, Nolan, what have you got? What you learned yesterday? I don't hear anything. I don't see her here. Okay. Suzanne Irwin. I don't see. There it is. Susie Irwin. Yep. Denise doesn't have a mic. Doesn't think her mic. Impressed by how the fabric is flexible. Thank you, Susie. Denise, what did you learn yesterday? We'll give you time to type it out. While Denise is typing, how about Dean Olson? There
Hey,
you
Dean
go.
Olson here, Lane County. I guess what I thought was interesting about what we learned yesterday was the like multi-tiered nature of how these records work. How you get kind of like a series of records that kind of, I don't know, sit on top of or next to each other that results in this not needing to break a common line between two properties that are generated off of separate records. Thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept about this. And again, it has nothing to do with cartography. It has to do with land records and how you're tracking land records and how you begin to identify what's related to what else and what was used to create certain things. And it is this multi-tiered approach to it. And there's, as with everything else in here, there's a lot of flexibility, and it just, the more you use the Parcel Fabric, the more you understand the real value of records. They really are amazing. And it kind of, once I used Parcel Fabric for about a year, my mind kind of went boom. I finally understood it. It's like, oh, wow, this is powerful. This is really powerful in what you can do with it. So, yeah, thank you. So I think the only person we have is Josh from Clackamas. Josh, you want to? Josh, are you here? Yep. Josh, do you have a mic? I see you're muted right now.
Denise answered in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Josh is talking about the seed and being actually a small polygon. It is right. That is correct. And Denise, I'm going to use yours to go and build on this a little bit more. Denise said she's new to this, so she's learned a lot that Parcel Fabric is, and the difference between ORMAP and Pro. I've been learning ORMAP under architecture and seeing some of the differences in Pro. Yes, so let's talk about that. All right, let's move forward on this. Because this is important, this is critical, especially those people that are looking to make this transition from ArcMap into ArcGIS Pro. Here's the first thing. Inside of ArcMap, the COGO values that are stored are actually stored as string values. But if I look at the actual field definition of lines inside of here, I can see that in fact, the direction field is actually a double word number. It is a numeric value. It is not a string value anymore. The distance field is now a double word number. It is numbers now. It is not strings. So the question is why? I have my clients constantly ask me why. And I tell them, it's easy to explain what. The harder part is why. So here's my evaluation. Here's my opinion of why they've changed into here. You've heard me say that this transition into Pro is really about rethinking what we do with land records from just merely creating maps of them into beginning to model them, to beginning to become curators of digital data. And one of the components of being a curator of the data is the ability to go and analyze the data and just identify, not see what's next to one another, but where did it come from? What quality is it? How does it compare to everything else that's adjacent to it or previously was done on here, to be able to do this analysis? And in order to do the analysis, these things have to be real numbers. They can't be string values on here. So that all of the COGO values inside of Pro, and this was the same in the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, but inside of Pro, these are all numeric values on here. They are not string values anymore. So that one of the components on here is, for example, when you first load this in, you will find that it's set to 6 decimal places. There's no separations on here. There's nothing on here. One of the first things I go and do when I'm going to be working on a parcel fabric is to set the configuration of these data fields so that the distance fields and some of these other linear fields, 2 decimal places, what I'm looking for. I could set it to 3 if I wanted to, but 2 decimal places. And in fact, I want to see thousands separators, and I want to pad it with zeros. And most importantly, I want to see the suffix that it's supposed to be, because otherwise it's all implicit. I want it to explicitly tell me what is that value representing on there, so that we go through and we make sure that that's all there. So if we look at these lots and we open up the attribute table on here, all right, let's go to something that actually has something. We can see, oh, that in fact, this is being represented as a quadrant bearing with 0 decimal points on the seconds. The distance fields, those are actually being represented and being shown to me that in fact 2 decimal places, and it's telling me these are feet. All right. So again, I set that up so it's easier for me to go and see and re-represent it. The same way I go when I set up the polygon fields, so that inside of here, I can highlight and my eyes can be drawn to the actual fields that I'm going to pay attention to. And I will set it up so that, for example, the static areas, these are showing me the rounded acreage on here. Same with calculated area, which we don't have anything in here calced on it, but it shows me the area in acreage. And at the same time, I'll go and I'll display the shape area field to reflect what it is in square feet. So I can intuitively see this without me having to do any internal calculations, what this is, and I can compare this. I can begin at least analyzing it because these are real numbers on here. All right. One of the biggest differences between MAP and Pro is the fact that it is now structuring the data so that you can begin to analyze it. You can look at it and say, okay, what is this thing? You know, how does it work? Which brings us into the Traverse tool. It now is keeping track of not just the COGO values on here, but it's also keeping track of other elements in here. So for example, let me go and select, let me use my old trick here, and let's just go and select the elements from here and go to my attributes of these lines. And I can see these all have COGO values on here. And it is including the direction, the actual distance on here. But here's one of the nice things that happens is that inside of Pro and inside the fabric, this is automatically getting set, but inside of Pro, we have the ability to go and track where did that COGO come from? What is the actual lineage of the values that are being stored there? And there's actually 3 values. There could be entered, which means that the user, the mapper that went and created this line actually entered those COGO values from any of the tools that has COGO options on there. And it allows me to say, okay, I entered this, so you can rely upon it because this is actually the deed information. This is the plat information that was on here, and it will keep track of that. If, however, I go and I create a line, let's go in here and create a line here. All right, and that line, by default, that line does not have COGO values on here at all. And that's all right. You inside the parcel fabric, you are definitely allowed to have lines that do not have COGO values on there. For example, natural lines, water lines, even PLSS lines if they're not of record. So you have lots of lines in here that are derived lines. They're not necessarily, they don't get input through meets and bounds or COGO. It'll be calculation lines, those sorts of things. And we'll explore that a little bit more. But in this case, this is a line that I just input, has no COGO values on. I'm going to go in here now, and I'm going to use the update COGO tool to go and take that line and have it automatically calculate the value. And note on the update COGO value, I can either just overwrite everything, or I can tell it that only overwrite if there's a variance above and beyond the value that's stored there. So in this case, I can say if it's more than a foot or 10-foot difference, recalculate the distance, or the bearing. If it's more than a degree, recalculate it. I'm just going to say do it all. By the way, in 3.1, this is also, there's another new one in here that says if the values are null, automatically go and recalculate on there. So let me go and recalculate these values. It has now calculated these values. And when I go in here and look, it's telling me that the values, that the COGO values are from the geometry. They've been inversed, and using the update COGO tool, they've been set that this is the length of the line. This is what the geometry of that feature represents, not what was entered in here. All right, one more option. If I go in here and take this and I go and do a divide on here, and I divide this into 2 equal parts. Remember, I showed you this a little bit yesterday. I divided it into 2 equal parts on here. Let's get off a divide. Let's go and look at the attribution here. And now it says it's computed. So if the COGO value, if the COGO type was originally entered and I did something to it, if I did a clip, if I did a split, if I did a divide, it then is being marked as saying, okay, this has been impacted since it was originally input, so that this is now showing you it's computed. So inside the parcel fabric, it gives you the ability to go and determine the lineage of the values that are stored in the COGO values. Again, all towards being able to have better analysis of the data. You again aren't using the data as much to create a map, even though you can do it. It's more about, let's analyze this data. Let's figure out what's really going on here with our data and use that to determine where we want to look for things and where we don't. All right. So let me go and any questions on that? By the way, by default, it's set to null unless there's COGO values in here. It's a good thing. It's a nice thing. So you can actually go through here and determine, so where did my COGO values come from, and can I rely upon them, those sorts of things. Good.
All right. A quick question about that. This is Andy.
Yes.
Hi. I guess what are some like reasons why you'd want to have different values there for that particular drop down there? I mean, is it just for your own information, I guess? I don't know. I'd be just curious. Like
So
some
here's
examples of where you would use different ones?
Yes.
Just real quick.
Yes. Most importantly, here in Florida, we are required by the Department of Revenue to provide them with annual submittals of not just the polygons, which reflect the parcels which are being assessed, but they also want to see the data that was used to create those polygons. All right. So every year we go and submit a shapefile containing polygons, which represent, oh, here's the parcels that are being assessed in the county. But we also give them a GIS database, which includes the lines for those polygons, for both tax polygons. For here in Florida, we're required to go and do subdivision boundaries and lines, block boundaries and lines, and lot set boundaries and lines, if in fact that property is subdivided, together with all the lines for the tax parcel, so they can see the quality of the mapping that's being done. And if they get the parcel fabric, they can immediately look to where those COGO values were derived. Were they input or were they computed? So that it means that they have some reliance upon those values, that they are reflective of the deed documents or the subdivision plats. Otherwise, if they were just from geometry, they know they've got to check it out to see whether or not that's mapped correctly. So it's it's a way to go and analyze the data to determine whether or not it is accurate and reflective of the recorded information on there.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not necessarily advocating that the Oregon DOR start doing that, or I don't even know if you do audits on your data, but yeah, it's just one of those things that this is one of the things that they're doing here in Florida. Okay, let me go and delete this traverse. I was showing you the curves on here. Let me go and do this and talk a little bit about closures on here. So let me go and start a new traverse. All right, and I want to go and do tax lines. Yeah, that's good. And here, and I'm going to go and input. Now again, And I'll make this easy. I'll just do 90-degree deflections. I use the same distance. And 90-degree deflections. And this time I'll use 199 feet. All right. Now, within the traverse, so by the way, this doesn't close, right? It doesn't close. Within the traverse tool inside of Pro, there's, if you look up at the options at the hamburger buns here, there's a couple options in here. So the first thing we have is we have this closure tolerance. How closely will this close? And if I were to go to make it 2 feet tolerance in here, it would automatically go and mark it as if it's within 2 feet, it will automatically close it for me. All right, that's the first thing you have is you have a tolerance here as far as how big this is. And that will then tell you that this misclosure is 1 foot. In fact, there's a misclosure ratio, which is the distance it doesn't close and the total sum of those legs, of those distances up to that point. So that's the ratio. 1 foot per 799 feet is what that's telling you. The calculated area in square feet and the closure that's brought forth is, in fact, it uses the compass rule adjustment. So that's fine. It's going to close it. It's going to create a polygon for me eventually. But there is in the traverse tool this closure routine. So the closure routines, and again, I'm using 3.0, allows me to do things such as just snap that last line closed. So it takes my closing vertex and will snap it over and close it for me automatically. Or it will give me the 3 standard types of closures, the compass rule, the transit rule, and the Crandall rule. All right. If you don't know the differences between them, you probably should just go and select the compass rule on there, which is the default, and use that. So that's one thing, is that you can go ahead and close this and say, go ahead and close it out, and it will close. Notice this information on here. All right. So now let me go back to lines. So I can close the traverse between my beginning point and ending point. By the way, because this starts at one point and goes around and finishes on the same point, this is what's known as a closed traverse. We will talk about open traverses here in a minute, but that's a closed traverse. Before we move this and the options in the traverse, let's also go and show that we have the ability to take these values and export them out so that we can export out to, and let's go in here. Yeah, we'll go in and do it here. And let's just overwrite this one here. Yeah. So we've gone and written it out. Let's go and look at what that actual value is on here. Training here, fabric. So here, this should look very familiar to you. This is the ORMAP traverse file format in which you see the first line says DT, which is the direction type, is quadrant bearing. DU is the direction unit, degrees, minutes, and seconds. The starting point coordinate values on here. And then it gets down to direction and distance, gives me the direction and the distance. Notice it's in the ORMAP format and 45-0-00 on here. If we do a non-tangent curve or a tangent curve, those are still the old ORMAP format, so that you can go and save a traverse file out and store it and then call it back later if you want. I know I have some of our clients that actually use traverse files as sort of their archive of what they used to create the original polygon boundaries. Is they write out these traverse files and they store them in an archive out there. Not a bad idea. But just I wanted to show you, this is in fact the old ORMAP. So if you have an archive of ORMAP traverse files out there, you can still bring those into ArcGIS Pro and they'll work exactly as they did in ArcMap. Any questions on that? Nope. Okay. So this is an open traverse here. So let's get off of here and we can go through and we create seeds and then we can build this. Boom. So let's go and create another traverse. And this time, what we're going to do is we're going to do it between 2 points. All right. So we're going to go and start here at this point here, and I'm snapping to that point. And then we're going to go 15 degrees northwest for 500 feet. And then we're going to go 90 degrees to that for 100 feet, just so that we can see that we're doing this. 90 degrees to that, a negative 90 deflection for 250 feet. And then I'm going to go and do and actually digitize a line to here. All right, when I digitize a line, I want you to see what happens. Inside of here, it will go and, let me go and expand this so you can see a little bit more. In this case, it digitized the bearing for me, but it also put in here the distance that was digitized, but put it in quotes. All right, put it in the brackets, meaning that this is in fact a digitized value and it should not be relied upon for doing any calculations. So within here, I actually have the ability to go and measure and store what those digitized values are inside the traverse. Okay. So if this maybe should have been, instead of this, let's say this should, maybe the deed says 14, and maybe this says 330. All right, no, not, it wasn't 330. So now let's leave it at that. Yeah, 330. Let's show there's an all automatically that. But this was supposed to close over to this point here. So on here, I can set a different closing point and let this closing point be here. All right, and tell it that's where it's supposed to close. I could then go into closure and say, well, snap the last line to it and it'll show me what those values are going to be. And I can adjust it and it will automatically snap that line over to a different point for my closure point above and beyond here. It will tell me what the misclosure distance is, what the misclosure ratio is, and what the actual square footage is of this. That's not a real value on here because it's an open traverse. It's not a closed traverse, but it at least will show me those values on here. So open traverses and closed traverses, it depends upon what you're doing and what you're looking on here to go and build out.
So can you proportion that or rotate it so all the distances and variance equal
So
out?
I went and told it to adjust this with the last line, but I could have done a compass rule adjustment, which would have been a proportioning of those of the overall distances and bearings to the difference in those coordinate values, and it would have proportioned that. Yes. Yeah.
So do you not use the closing point when you're doing a closed traverse?
No, because the closing point is assumed.
Gotcha. That's where I was having a problem.
Yeah, you don't in a closed traverse where you're actually closing back on the same one, you don't have to set the closing point. You automatically can just go back up to the closure and say, close this thing. It's assumed it's going to be that same value. All right. We're good with this. So let's go back to this And I'm sorry, I'm skipping around a little bit, but let's go back to that parcel here and look at the values of that parcel. All right. So on here, oh, look at this. There is, in fact, there's the shape area in square foot. By the way, that's not calculating right. But what it has is, if I'm using the traverse tool and it is calculating using my Kogo lines, and I tell it to close it out and then to use those lines to go and create seeds and build them out, it automatically is capturing the misclosure ratio, the misclosure distance on there for my polygon when I create it. So if I use the traverse tool to go and input those Kogo values and use those Kogo lines to go and calculate a seed, to create a seed and build it, it will automatically go and store on here those disclosure information for that traverse. Okay. So that's the traverse tool. Next, any questions on the traverse tool?
I have a quick question. How much of these features are just unique to Parcel Fabric? Is this all stuff that's just ArcGIS Pro right now that we're looking at?
With the exception of one. So these lines, Kogo, that's fine. The exception here is that the Parcel Fabric is the one that sets the Kogo type.
Okay.
But everything else, the closure, storing it on polygons, that's all built into Pro.
Cool. All right.
All right. So it's only this setting the Kogo type that's on here. All right. So let's clear this out. Let's go and we'll just use the same record on here. And
Frank, I have a quick question.
yes.
So you said it was pulling the Kogo type off of Parcel Fabric. Is that field still?
Hold on, not quite. It was taking the closure of the traverse when it built the polygon, when it built the seed. It's taking the closure of it and putting it in. The Kogo type is being captured while I'm inputting the Kogo values out of the traverse tool.
Is that field there if you're not using Parcel Fabric?
I do not believe it in a normal feature class. And let's go and do this again. Let's go and create a new line feature class here.
Because it's a function that would be beneficial even if you're not in Parcel Fabric to know how that variant distance was inputted.
Construction lines, let's do a line here. And let's not go and add any fields in here. Why? This is not right. Should be. Why would not a new feature class? Let me go and save this. That's why. You need to save those edits. Now let's do it. Let's call it scratch lines. Let's do that. And this is a line feature class. That looks better. Okay. Then I go to finish. Because I had some unsaved edits, it wouldn't let me go and create a new one. So I'm creating a line feature class that I'm going to use, and by default, we'll look at it and experiment with this. Okay. Now, once I create this line feature class, come on. I want to look at it and experiment with it. It will add it to my table of contents. while this is doing this, I'm going to take a real short break. All right, I'm going to pause our. All right, I am back. So it went and created this, and if we look at this, the fields on here, we will notice got no fields in here. There's no attribution at all on here. So what we have to do, just as in ArcMap, we actually have to go and tell it to add COGO fields to it. And inside ArcGIS Pro, it's called Enable COGO, in which we go and tell it to go and input it on the scratch fields, or the scratch lines feature class. And it will add the standard COGO fields on here. It's usually around the time when somebody says, why is it so much slower? And as I said, I can answer what, but I can't answer why. It is getting faster. The newer versions are getting faster, but there are certain functions. It seems to take, it's all it's doing is adding fields. Why is it taking so long? I don't know. So now if I go and look at this, and again, go to my data design, to my fields, I can see the COGO, direction, distance, radius, arc length, radius 2. There is no COGO type field in here. So to answer your question, and I'm sorry, I forgot who actually asked it, but the answer to the question is that no, it is not part of the standard COGO inside of here. Sorry, so that is part of the parcel fabric configuration on there. All right. Okay, so let me make sure. Can everybody hear me? Am I back?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. I saw radio silence there. There was nothing, no feedback on here. All right, so let's go back again now and actually do a traverse. And let's introduce a concept called ground to grid. Now, the ground to grid is actually located in two places. It's on the Edit tab. So if we click to edit, it's over here on the Edit tab. And what the ground to grid does is it allows you to go and apply an adjustment to adjust both for what could theoretically be differences from projections, or could be that you have a different basis of bearing on a legal description that you're going to be going and inputting. But it's here on your Edit tab, but it's also down here is the ground to grid correction. It's located on the lower status bar on your display area. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and put a parcel in here, and we're going to go and use an assume bearing along this line. So to go and create that assume bearing, what I'll do is I'll go and tell it that I want to enter the bearing as it appears on my legal description. So perhaps this is referenced as being 15 degrees northeast. And if I use 0 here, it's not going to make any changes in the scale. It's just going to be used for a sort of rotation. And then I'm going to go and it's going to prompt me to say, click on the start point on the grid and click on an end point on the grid. These do not have to be points. This is basically just going and using the line itself and calculate what the difference is between what you input and what you input as the bearing. So now when I say go ahead and start here, all right, notice my ground to grid pops up. And this is now telling me that it's going to apply a rotation on here. And I forget, did it actually, what did I actually say this was? This is 15 degrees northeast, I think is what I did. And let's do 500 feet. And sure enough, even though it's 15 degrees northeast, it's actually going and mapping this and applying a rotation on here. So let's real quickly just go in and create this, close this out on here and get off of here. And let's look at actually those, let's do it with the selection instead. Unselect, unselect, there's our lines that we just created. And let's unselect our point. So on here, it is telling us a couple things. One, the COGO bearing that we input, the COGO distance, and that it was entered, but then it's also telling us that in fact, there has been a ground to grid correction applied to this line, and that it was a rotation of 11 degrees, 46 minutes and 48 seconds, and the scale factor of 1. All right, so again, this is only the parcel fabric. This is not standard COGO, because our standard COGO lines don't have COGO type is COGO ground, rotation, or scaling. This is only within the parcel fabric. But when you're working inside the parcel fabric, again, this is a way for it to go and track what's actually been created in here and how it actually integrates in here. So this can be assumed that this is the D distance and direction, and that when we entered the values in here, and in fact there was a rotation, this was a basis of bearing input, there was an assumed bearing of some sort along that line, and it stored that value for me, including the scaling, whether or not it rotated it and whether it scaled it out. Questions?
I just think that's a real handy tool. I mean,
Oh,
as a cartographer, I spend, so much time trying to figure out how I'm going to rotate this to the grid or to whatever basis the surveyor used in 1930.
Yeah. So again, with standard RTS Pro, you can still apply a ground to grid correction, but it doesn't record it on there. Whereas with the parcel fabric, Travers, in addition to storing what you put in, it's also going to do where the value come from. Is it ground to grid, rotation, and scaling? And just sort of to go deeper into this, those values, the ground to grid corrections, rotations, scalings, those are used as part of a least squares adjustments. The least squares adjustment goes and uses stored values on the lines and determines and uses those stored values to determine whether or not points need to be moved and what's the minimum that has to be moved in order for everything to fit together correctly. So it is just a built-in component of the parcel fabric, but the tool is actually in Pro, but it's not used all the time in Pro. You can use it for drawing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to store it or use it at any time in the future.
If you apply a ground to grid correction, is it going to maintain that same ground to grid until you change it? Or
so let's go over here. Let's do a different parcel. Here's, oh, look at that. It still pops up until you actually change that ground to grid. And again, it's popping up there so to remind you, I've got a ground to grid appearing here. So be aware of that. Okay. So yes, the answer is yes, it will stay until you do one of two things. You either reset it or you disable and toggle off this value. And again, this toggles on. There's no ground grid being done here. It toggles on, there's a ground to grid, toggles off, and there is no ground to grid. So you can see it's actually toggling on and off there for it. So it will do it as long as it is toggled on. All right. Okay,
Hey, Frank,
just-
this is Mike with DOR. I have a quick question on that ground to grid. Are you
Okay.
able to actually close it if it does not close? Like you can do in the Traverse?
Not with ground to grid. Ground to grid is something that actually goes and excuse me, hold on. My AirPod just dropped out. Hold on. I'm back. All right. So the actual ground to grid is not necessarily a closure on here. It actually is more of a setting for that individual line. So it doesn't look at a chain of lines. It only looks at that one thing, whether or not it is got a rotation or any adjustment to what values are being used to create it. Does that help?
Yes, that helps.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. One more thing. We were talking about earlier, somebody brought up the question of spiral curves. All right, so let's actually go and create something. And I'm just going to use a non-traverse COGO value here. I'm going to do just a sort of COGO inputting of a line by using the constraints. Okay. And again, works the same. In this case, 250. Say, go ahead and do that. And it's at this point that we can see that if we right click on here, there is absolute XY for the next point, delta XY, Z for the next point, direction, distance, circular curve, or spiral curve. All right, so there is a spiral curve here that we can input, and it brings up a panel. Tells us what the tangent coming in, asks us for the start radius, asks us for the end radius, asks us for the arc length. All right. And whether or not it's to the right or to the left. Go in here, make this a little bit more. All right. So in fact, it allows us to go and input the spiral elements on there to create a spiral curve. You cannot create a spiral inside the traverse. However, while you are in a traverse, you can move your cursor over and right click and say spiral curve, input those values and store those, and that becomes part of the traverse. However, if I look at this, one of the problems with this is that ArcGIS Pro does not have a graphic primitive that's a true spiral curve. So that the best that they can do, the best that Esri can do right now, is if I go in here and get out of here, go in here. Why won't it let me do this? And I say edit vertices. It actually is not a true spiral curve. It's an approximation of the spiral curve as far as the geometry. And it does it with a series of chords. But it does store, in fact, that it starts with the starting is 0, the end is 450, the length is 500 for it. Same way, if I go to my attributes of this, it will tell me that the initial radius is 0, the ending radius is 500. My radius, my arc length is 500, and my overall is 450. Questions? My AirPods were kicking out there. Make sure I'm hearing things I don't know if I am right now. Okay, I think I can hear again. Somebody say something for me.
Well, I'm happy with it.
Okay. Okay, yeah, it's probably, it's not a true spiral curve, but it's an approximation. It's as close as you're going to get here with the what they can do inside of here right now. All right. Any other questions on that? Any questions on the traverse tool, on the ground to grid, or on the spiral? No. Okay. So let's talk more about the parcel fabric and some of the tools that are in and specific to the parcel fabric. We went over a tiny bit about these yesterday. So if I have, let's go in and let's go over to a different area here. Let's create a new record. Again, we create a record so it goes tracks us for this. We're then going to go and do a traverse on here. All right, we're going to be tax lots. We're going to start here. And we are not doing any sort of adjustment on here. That's fine. I'm going to automatically go and do something a little bit different. And I'm going to make sure that it doesn't comply with this. All right. And I'm going to plus 90, 200, plus 90, 200, plus 90, 200. All right. So it closes, but it's not anywhere near aligned with the parcel that we are going to cut it out of, where it's supposed to go. We're all good with this. I then create a seed for this, and I build this. Everybody good? We built this on top of something else, but it's not aligned at all. So one of the first things we need to do is start looking at how do we make sure that this parcel lines up with the parcel that we're putting it on top of, that it's supposed to be cut out of, that it's supposed to be split out of. And we could have done that by doing a rotation on it. There's a lot of different things that we could have done. We could have done an applied ground to grid correction on here. But there's also a tool that we have inside the parcel fabric, which will allow us to do that. And that's called the Align Parcels tool. Very powerful tool, very powerful tool. What this tool will do is it will allow us to go and calculate where this should all go relative to the one that we've got selected right now. So in this case, you'll see that it actually is showing us a buffer area that's 5 foot around our actual parcel that we've constructed. Now, since I was so far out on this, I'm probably going to have to go and do something like 40 foot on here to make sure that the places that it's supposed to be aligned to are within my buffer tolerance. Again, this is highly exaggerated, but I just want to go and use this to go and show you what this will do. And I'm going to tell it that to look 40 feet outside the boundaries of here and to go and find anything that's within 40 feet here and then show me where this will adjust this. All right. And in fact, it will show it this way. 40 feet is not big enough here because it's not doing that. Okay. Tell it to generate this again. Delete all links. All right, generate this again. There we go. So this was so far off that it was trying to go and generate where this thing is supposed to go. Literally too far off. I should have been a little bit more careful when I went and put this together. So I'm actually going to abandon that. I'm going to say, no, can't even do that. That's not going to work. Instead, I might manually adjust this closer by going and saying, select everything that I have, and then rotating it. The rotate tool allows me to go and move this point over to here, and then allows me to go and rotate this. Now note what's happening is where it's intersecting that, it's going and would be adjusting these parcels. It would be adjusting that line because of topology. Let me go and turn off the topology here. All right. And let's go back here and rotate this again and see. And I can get it closer.
And I was gonna say that little click you did, that's control, right?
I'm sorry, it was a little bit reduced. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and I would say with the rotate stuff, and this was one of my fun pieces because I just watched you do that. It's like holding down control and clicking the point changes where you rotate it from, correct?
Correct. It does. It goes and changes where it goes and rotates where it goes and moves things over there.
Frank, I have a question about the rotate tool. This is Wendy from Tillamook.
Yes.
So I would like to look at the far point where it's snapping into place, but you can't zoom into that and still have the green wheel to turn. Is there a way to like move that wheel and not the anchor point so you can see the wheel and rotate when you're close up on the point that's snapping?
So let's just go and undo this and let's look at this a little bit more. All right. So let's go to rotate. So as Violet says, in order to move this rotate anchor, I can go over and move my cursor over onto an existing point, and when I hold down Control key and click on that, it will move that rotate point over there. All right, and now you're saying that you can't snap in and move that in?
Right.
Okay, so I used my scroll wheel to move in and out just to make sure you understand how I did that. But more importantly, and this is just to get you close, there's a couple things in here. There is a secret snapping anchor. Viola likes this one. There's a secret snapping anchor. All right. It's a little bit of alliteration on here so that if I'm in rotate, I can type the S key, and that S key will go and give me an anchor that's going to be used for snapping to it. And I just did it so it was off the line, just so you can see it. And that toggles on and off so that if I snap to that point and say, okay, I want that to snap as I'm rotating around. Okay, then I can zoom in here. And if I hold my cursor over something that's selected, it will now snap to that point there.
You just put your cursor over the line. That's all you did? You're
Yes.
not
So
holding any buttons?
yes. Okay. Let's undo this again, just to make sure that we understand this. Okay. So if I've got this here and I click on rotate, by the way, I hate the way this interface works, but it does. I'm stuck with it. So here's the thing. If I go over here and I click anywhere other than what is selected or on the green, Fisher Price ring, if I click anywhere else, it moves off of the rotate tool. So if I click here, it's not rotating anymore because I don't have that selected anymore. So let me go and select this again and move. And first thing I will do is I will hold down my Control key because I want to move my rotate anchor over there. Then I will come in here, and as I move my cursor on top of one of those points, it doesn't have to be a point, it could be a line, and hit my S key, that will toggle the snap anchor. Now, in order to do this rotation, I have only two places that I can select. One is this green Fisher Price ring, which I really hate. Or the other one is on anything that's selected. So I can move in here, and it has, as long as I have my cursor on here to anything that's selected here, I can hold down my left key and then move it through and snap it and bring it around.
That's beautiful. I knew about the anchor point, but I didn't know how to zoom in and look at my snapping point when I was snapping.
Yes. So, by the way, like I said, I wouldn't call it hate, but I would call it disgust at the way that interface works. When we first started moving and testing ArcGIS Pro, we've been arguing about that since the very beginning. And we don't know why, they made the anchor point, the first anchor point, yellow instead of the little cross. Why did you make it yellow? Why? I mean, that's tough to see.
Agreed.
Tough enough to see sometimes. Why'd you make it yellow? You should have made it some sort of other marker in there. Secondly, the fact that if I click anywhere other than on the ring or the selected feature, it gets off of the rotate function and stops it. They were really poor interface design decisions that they made. So
Right.
anyway, yes.
This is Jeff in Washington County. It'll snap to that line without the secondary anchor point, correct?
No. No, in this case, it will not. So if I go in here and go to rotate, it's again, hold down my Control key, come over here and snap it. And if I go in here, and if I go and do this now, because I have a point, I don't know. Well, the point is actually snapping to that. is what I'm getting. My point is going to snap there, but if I did not have a point, if I unselected my points, oh, sorry, go back out again. Move my snap over here. And since I don't have points now, it is snapping to my line there. You're right.
You have edge selected in snapping.
That's exactly in
settings.
snapping. I do have this here. I have my edge snapping being selected on here. So I have point snaps, I have endpoint snaps, I have vertex edge snapping. I also have my intersect, and I have my midpoint snapping set. So you are correct. It would have done that on
Okay.
there. So
Just
you're
making
right.
sure I wasn't totally doing it wrong.
No, you are right. If I have snapping on here, it would, but sometimes it won't.
If it wasn't a perfectly straight line, it wouldn't probably.
It would.
So that
It would
point,
have an issue. Yeah,
setting
but
that
you
point
do-
would be useful.
Yeah, it does. It is often better to go and do that. By the way, notice if I zoom in here now, I have a corner in here that's actually marked as being an anchor point. All right, when I set my anchor point for that, some of that was because of my using the adjust parcels, in case anyone's asking where that came from. That's what it was. So now let me go and select this again. On here, there is my, and let me get off of rotate. Now that I'm closer, let me go and see about doing an align parcels on here. And when I tell it to go and generate, put it in here, go and generate, that's a little bit closer, but it's still not doing this in here. So I'm still not happy with that. Let me go modify off of here. The align parcels tool, just to let you know, is Esri's attempt to make realignment of parcels and make them fit and adjust things. Their attempt. It actually is two tools put together into one. So when I go to align parcels here, it is this first part up in here is actually the transform tool. The second part down here is the align features tool. I'm going to demonstrate them both to you so you can see what they do. The transform tool wants me to go and set linkages between points as far as where they're going to move. So if I'm saying that this point is supposed to move to this point here, and that this point is supposed to move, let's just call it perpendicular to here. All right, so it will allow me to go and put points in here and tell it where they're supposed to move. Now this is that has an anchor point on here, so that I could actually conceivably go and say this is actually supposed to go here. And what that will do is it will allow me to go and apply a transformation. And it can be an affine transformation, which requires 3 points. It could be a similarity transformation, rubber sheeting, linear rubber sheeting, or natural neighbor rubber sheeting. Let's do an affine transformation originally, and it will go and transform that. Notice with the affine, it went and moved that. We'll go back here. Have them again, and now we'll do a similarity transformation. Goes and similarity is a little bit closer in here. I'll go and undo this again, and now I'll do a rubber sheeting transformation. All right, and finally, I'll do a rubber sheeting with natural neighbor transformation. All right, so this tool allows you to go and create linkages and will adjust whatever you have selected to fit into that. All right, those are sort of, that's that front part, the beginning part of the align features component on here. Let's delete all the links in here. Let's go back to align parcels tool. So this in here where you generate links and create these links, that has to do with the transform tool portion of this tool. The other part of the tool is this point to edge tool, and that actually uses the, where are we here? The align features tool. Align features tool is actually one of my favorite tools. This tool allows me to go and take and draw a line, and I'm going to go and just draw it right now from here to here. All right, and it allows me to go and apply a buffer. And in this case, let's do 30 feet. And all vertices within that buffer will be adjusted to follow that new alignment. So I could click here and it would align it here. Yeah, let me go in and that turn off here. It's interesting. There's a constraint rule here that I was not aware of. Let's try this again. Oh, I know what it is because of this control point here. This control point here actually has a rule that says you can't move it. All right, so I'm going to go in and change this to a square so that I don't include that inside here. Thank you, and it will go and realign this. It will go in. Sorry. This is if the shape is fixed, you can't move it, so that there's nothing in here that's fixed. Unless that one point. Interesting. It should not be doing that. It was poor for me to go in and select something with a control point on here. I'm going to take this point. Change that to no. Sorry. By the way, that's just showing you a little bit more. Control points in the parcel fabric just basically have it set so that you've got a fixed shape. It cannot move control points anymore. That's what that's actually doing. So let me go back here again. Let's redraw this here, from here to here. All right, and let's do it rounded now. And it will go and take all vertices, all points, all features, and realign them. Even without a selection, it would go and this is interesting the way this is set up. Why is it not editable?
So Frank,
Yeah, you've got some things set on here that are.
I think
not
you've got a,
standard.
I think you got a constraint rule from us that should not be there.
Yep. Yep, it is. That's what's causing this issue here. So
And
it's
I
not the
don't know what the
standard.
constraint rule is. I'll check for you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you. I'm just going to go and use that constraint rule, and I'm going to go and disable it. Sorry about that. We definitely got off on a rabbit hole. I'm sorry.
So that constraint rule shape is fixed. That's something old. That is not a tools committee rule.
Yeah. And I think it had to do with the fact that it was the original version, and I'm now using 3, so it's exposing it a little bit more to me. And so it was originally.
Yeah, I think that was way back from 2.5 to 2, somewhere in the dim dark past, and we've just always disabled all our rules and then specifically turn the ones we want. So we've just been dragging it with us. So thank you for finding the badness for us. We'll take that out of the tools.
So yeah, we'll probably break down for a 20-minute, 15-20-minute break, but go ahead.
Do you have any edits going on?
I already
Now?
saved the edits.
Okay, so the edits are all
Yeah,
saved.
that was the other thing. So let me just illustrate one more time. Let's try this. Here it is here. Here it is here. It should now go, and I don't know what's going on here. Points, no edits, no nothing here. Let's do this. Let's turn it on again. Let's draw this again.
There's still some rule there. You may
There's
want to.
something in there. Yeah,
We
it's
can look at
something.
I can look at this over break.
Yeah. All right. Sorry about this. Sorry. So we'll see what the issue is and what's going on here, and go from there. Let's take a 20-minute break. All right. And we'll come back after the break. Please think about questions on things that I demonstrated correctly, things that I wasn't able to demonstrate, and let's see if we can move forward. We are just now in the beginning of looking at some of the tools, and we'll go from there. I'm going to pause the recording. So I do want to go and show and share with you something that I find extremely handy, is that I'll often have multiple map views open. And if I have multiple map views open and I wish to go and sync them, I can go to the View tab and then tell it that to link my views so that they all have the same center and extent, so that now when I go back over here, it actually will have the same linkage and extent, and it'll be looking at the same area. All right. So now I am editing. I'm in here. Let's go and turn off our labels here.
I just ran a line fine.
And let's do an alignment here. I don't know what's going on here, why it's not allowing me to do a simple. I mean, let's just clear out here, do this. Would it have been something to do with that point? Could it be that the points are somehow set some sort of strange? Or one of these layers.
So I just did it. Using the class data I downloaded.
And you have the other layers turned on?
I just made everything editable and drew a box that was not quite right and set a line.
Sorry
That
for
look-
those of you that are watching, you will know, and Dean already knows this, I'm a bulldog. Once I find an issue, I want to know what's causing it.
It's worked for you now.
Let's look and see. I haven't got all of them turned on. If I turn on my lots now. Tax code.
Tax code's a district. It's a district parcel type.
It's a administrative.
Yep.
All right, it worked as long as this one was turned off. But if it's not turned off, it didn't work.
There's no constraint in the tax code.
All right. Not quite sure why we're running into this issue here, but we were running into an issue. So I'm going to circle back and we're going to start again. And let's see if we can figure out, let's start with we went into a rabbit hole there and it just kept getting deeper and deeper. And I'm sorry, I apologize for that. It's one of my personality weaknesses that when I find something that's not working, I don't want to let it go until I've figured out what's going on. But in this case, we're going to have to let it go. There's something strange going on with the setup at the moment. All right. Copy lines 2 is a tool that I wanted to go and initially demonstrate. So let's just go and move into a new area.
I have a quick question about the align features.
Yes.
It's only for lines and polygons, right? It's not for other elements you'd want to align, correct?
The align features is for any feature inside of ArcGIS Pro
Okay.
That's any vector-based feature.
Okay.
It is not raster-based, but it is any vector-based. So it's
Oh, okay. Great.
if in fact, and again, it's a great tool. We use it all the time. We might have land use and zoning and municipalities and things like that that we want to realign. We might have areas that we are rebuilding as we're going through, and we use the align features tool because it allows us to go and easily realign or make sure that they are coincident with certain elements in here. Let me go
Got
and
it.
try this one more time. If I go in here and I create a parcel, and I create a parcel, all right. This is get tax numbers. I've got it on the outside. It's going to create a parcel. So I love attribute rules, but sometimes there's constraints that don't let you go and do things on them. So if I have this feature, and it could be any feature anywhere in here, the align features tool will allow me to go and draw a line. All right, and any vertex inside of that line will, in fact, be moved perpendicular to that line so that I can get it so that it will automatically go and move them over to that line. If I were to join a, and say this is a curve from here to here, all right, let's set this margin up big enough. It will actually go and take those features and change the geometry on them so that they will follow the path that I just drew and redefine them. And the power is, it's not just the things I have selected, because I don't even have to have a selection. I can tell it to drill down to everything that is editable, that is turned on, so it's on display and it's selectable and editable. Go ahead and fix them all at the same time, and it will go and redefine, drill down through those layers and redefine the geometries for those areas which are within that buffer, that tolerance, and redefine them. So for example, if I were to go and say, well, I want to go and redefine this so that this does not have a bend in it anymore. This does not have a bend in it anymore. All right, let me move it back to 50 so I avoid that point there. It will now go and take and realign the geometry for everything that's underneath and is visible at the moment to reshape it into that realignment on here.
Cool.
Ultra powerful tool, one of the best that's out there right now. This is the reason why we at Panda actually moved to ArcGIS Pro at 1.9 or something. That was the first time they introduced this tool. Great tool.
Hey, Frank, this is Robert with DOR. Question on the alignment on that. If you have Kogo geometry on the lines underneath that, and you will use the alignment tool, will the Kogo geometry stay with those lines?
Yes, the Kogo geometry, or basically attribution of those lines, that does not get automatically recalculated on here. There are some tools that will recalculate, but not align features. Things like extend lines and intersect lines and stuff, those will have the option to allow you to recalculate, but there is no internal default setting that says when you change a shape, recalc Kogo. There is none inside of Pro, like there used to be.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Sorry, again, this was a huge rabbit hole and I was distracted. I am glad that I was able to go and show you this is the way it's supposed to work on here. So let us go to copy lines 2. All right. Copy lines tool allows you to go and take the geometry and use that so that you can go and change the geometry of the parcel that you have selected. So for example, if I were going to do a split, I could create a record. All right, create a record. Then I could select my parcel. Now, one of the interesting things about the parcel fabric is, again, the way they define a parcel is the parcel is defined as being the polygon, the lines that were used to create that polygon, and the points that are unique to that polygon. So if I go in here and select this with a record active and say copy lines to, and tell it, go ahead and copy those lines, turn everything else off other than my active record. And those are some of the options in here. And then show me what these lines are. So let me go and turn them off here. Let me clear this out. I now have those lines that were used to go and build this parcel. Now, when I built this parcel, I now have the ability to go and use this to go and create a new configuration of this parcel. And you saw me do this yesterday when I went and created that subdivision. And then I used that subdivision to go in there and create lots. And it's the same thing here. If I wanted to take this line, and my legal description said I should take it and divide it at a certain place. Maybe they said start at 100 feet south of here. I could actually go in there and say at 100 feet south of this first. So let's make it 500 feet so we can see the difference. 500 feet from this, go and split the line, divide that line up. And I can tell it from the start of the line or the end of the line. And I can do it as a distance, and I can hit divide and it will go and divide it. And there I will wind up with two pieces, one 500 and one 1,611.42 feet. I can go ahead and do that. Now, just to sort of show you, let me go and label my points in here, my lines. And of course, I've got labels that have different elements on here because I'm zoomed out so far. Sorry. All right. So there's my Cocoa points here. There's where I went and divided this. I could take this one here and divide it also into, again, with the divide tool, I had the option to do it as single distance, or I could do multiple distances that are repeated. So I could do 4 100-foot distances here from the start to the end, or, which is this one here, it's equal distances that are repeated another number of times, or I could do varying distances in which I say, maybe this is, and let's go from the start here. Maybe this has one that is 100 feet and another one which is 250 feet in here. And it will show me what those distances are as I divide them up. It will divide them up, and then it will go and create those in here. All right, this was the distance that I input. This was the distance that it went and calculated afterwards. All right, that's computed afterwards. So, I made that new map. Let me go in here and go to symbology and correct this so I can at least see the ends of it. Okay. All right. So again, the copy lines too allows me to go in here and modify and tell it to go and show me, oh gosh, show me a way to go and create a new split or a new configuration of that geometry on here. All right, can we go and allow me to do that? Let me turn these others off so it doesn't confuse. So now I could go in here and I could create a line in here, maybe not a cocoa line, but I could create a line in here, which would go and be useful for when I go to create a seed. The copy lines 2 is a way to go and use the parent geometry, modify it to go and create new configuration or new type of parcel, parcel splits and such. All right, that's one of the options for it, is to go and use that. When it does that, it goes and takes that original parcel, and marks it as historic. All right, it marks the original parcel as historic. Since and let's turn this off and this off here, clear this out. Let's go and do a select on here. And note that since I went and you got some weird things going on in here, Dean, sorry. There's a value in here of other in the source type. That's not correct. It's not in the domain at all. But anyway.
Yes, there is. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and that's what we're seeing here. Sorry. So this is showing that, in fact, if I only select this one here, this is a historic line. So as I go and make modifications to my data, it's tracking not just what polygons I no longer am using, but I've modified, but also what lines I've modified. They get marked historic, and they'll get marked historic by the global ID of the record that's being used to create those. So it's a way to begin tracking not just what your current parcels look like, but what the historic parcels look like and what made them historic. All right, and it goes back to all of the elements there of, as you're doing a transaction, it's going to record what was created and what was deleted or retired on here. If in fact I had done that split without a record, that line would have actually not been marked as historic. It would have just been split and there would have been no residual left of that. Copy lines 2 is again a way to take an existing geometry and modify it so that you can use that primarily for splits. However, it can also be used, for example, if you are tracking, for example, subdivisions and you're mapping, you've got a complete subdivision layer and you've got lot layers, tax lot layers, and other layers in here. I could use the copy lines 2 to actually go and change and create a new polygon. And I could take that and create subdivision polygons for those. All right, and in this case, I could take that, and if I wanted to, I could change that configuration on there. I'm just going to go and say, build this out, and it will create new subdivision polygons for that match the original geometry. Takes the geometry, the lines, and the polygons, and copies it into this case, the other layer. When it does that, the original parcels that I had selected do not get marked historic because they're not being retired. They're actually still there, but now I have on top of them new subdivision parcels. Okay. So depending upon the workflows, it can be useful for a couple of different things. And you'll find that with most of these tools, depending upon how you're using them, they can be used to track these historic things, or they can be used to go and build new components out of them, marking them, relating them all to the same record. Questions? Change parcel type. If I've got a parcel that I have selected, let's go and turn off my tax parcels. If I have a parcel that I have selected here, and I have a record, I can go in here and I can use the change parcel types tool to go and change it to a different parcel type. All right. In this case, I'm changing it to a subdivision parcel type. What it actually does is it takes the polygon and the lines associated with that parcel and deletes it and copies it over to that new parcel type into subdivisions. And there is no historic right now. There is no parcel there. And this historic was the first one, not the second one. So I probably should have gone to a different one to do that. But it will go and not create a new history. Let's go and do this here. That parcel, when I do a change parcel type, change it into, I got to have it turned on. Take that one and change it into a subdivision. All right, what it's doing is just taking the polygon, taking the lines and copying them out of the tax lots and pasting them over into subdivisions. When I turn this off, it no longer is it in tax parcels and it's not marked as a historic. It's just sort of cut and pasted into the other layer. That's the change parcel type. So if you create it in the wrong parcel type, you can go and modify it in there. Duplicate parcel, which is this one here, allows me to go and literally do a copy. It copies the polygons and the lines and pastes them into either another layer or the same layer. And this is used for building condominiums. However, there's another tool for building condominiums, which is even better suited to this. Not what Ezra was showing yesterday. There is a tool called a vertical copy on here. Where are we? Why don't I just look for vertical? All right, vertical, duplicate vertical. That duplicate vertical allows me to go and take and give it an offset, maybe 10 foot, and I want it to go and duplicate it 5 times. And I can even tell it what the Z values are on here. And it will duplicate it 5 times. Now, when I go in here and select this, I now have not 1, but I actually have 6 of them. My original one, and then the 5 that are duplicated on top of it. The way that you can do condominiums, even with simple polygons, without looking at doing any attribution for layers or floor levels or things of that sort. This is the 3.0 version of doing condominiums on here. Change, duplicate. All right. Set historic. By the way, if there are any questions or comments, please just stop and, otherwise I will keep talking. So
You said that's 3.0, so the duplicate vertical available in 2.9?
yes, they are. Sorry.
Okay.
It is also available in 2.9 for that. So you can go and do that same thing in 2.9, and it will basically, it just stacks the polygons. It does give it a vertical displacement with the duplicate vertical. It will give it that and store it there. It's probably as good a point as any to go and talk about this now. In fact, the polygons in here, if we look at the actual field definition of shapes, this is in fact a 3D polygon and 3D lines. These are they have Z values. They have X, Y, and Z values within the parcel fabric. So it does have 3D capabilities. It's built in. It depends upon how you actually use it. You can use it simple as 2D, or you can start building it into 3D on there. All right. Set historic and current. This is again, I can take a parcel, and I can go in, and it's easier to do it on this one. I can set historic, and I can take that and set it historic. And as I'm setting it historic, it will go and change, and that attributes, all right, it will go and change the attributes of the ones that I have selected and mark them all with the retired by record of the record, the global ID of the record that was active at that time. So let me go in and just show you that if in fact I undo this and I turn that off, I suddenly no more have these to actually change them on here. So even if I go and select this parcels, I don't have these abilities because there is no record being used on here. All right. Current and historic. And basically, just a reminder, all it really does is either populate the created by record or the retired by record on the components of the parcel, on the polygon and the lines associated with, and any unique points that are associated with it.
Sorry, Frank, when you did the duplicate vertical, you've got some numbers that don't actually seem to mean anything. Is there some place that tells the elevation so that I know which unit is which?
So when I duplicated these lots, all right.
So you've got lots stacked on top of each other.
Yep.
And I don't know which one is the first floor and which one's the fifth floor.
Right. And so if you're going to use stacked polygons to represent condominiums, it is a great idea to go and include an attribute which does not come standard of what floor are these things. Okay. So it's a good idea to do that. Let's go ahead and
thanks.
Let's save my edits because it brings up another point in here. I'm going to save my edits here. I'm going to further destroy Dean's values here. And let's just add a floor. Okay. And this floor, let's make it a short imager. On here. So I then will have a floor value. And again, I'm working against all of the records or all of the tax lots which are in this database as I'm changing this changing the structure of this database. And introducing some more tools.
Frank, this is Robin.
Yes, Robin.
So while this is processing, a quick question. We're adding floor number. Where can we add floor height?
Oh, we could
And
do
Z
it just as
value.
easily. You could do it just as easily here. The question is this going to be extruded from the actual Z value from an elevation model, or are these going to be assumed above ground level? So it's the first floor is 10 feet above ground level, or is this actually going to be elevations that you're using?
Yes to any of those.
So you can store them, and I'm gonna move this up here, by the way, so we can see this up here. You can add an attribute for Z values for you. All right, and on those, the attribute here, by the way, is the floor value. We can have it automatically calc through an attribute rule, or we can go and actually assign those elevations if we want to go and just input them. What I'm going to show you is something similar to that. All right, there's a tool called sequential numbering. This tool allows you to go and have values that are calculated as you go around. So this tool is down here. It's called sequential numbering. And I'm going to tell it that on my tax lot layer, all right, the one that I'm on here, what field do I wish to calculate? In this case, I'm going to go and tell it to calculate the floor field. And I'm going to tell it to start on floor number 1 and increment it by 1 each time. All right. And then I just draw a line, and I'm just going to draw a line through this polygon. And it's going to go and attribute these polygons so that this is floor number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and we'll go and calculate to the next one there. So I could sequentially number them as I'm first populating this on here. I could do the same thing with the name field, in which I can go in here and say, well, let's not on the floor field, not on the elevation field, but on the actual name field here, I could tell it the start value on 501 and then increment it by 1 each time. And just to show you, this is actually a formatting component on here. This is something, yeah, I think the name is a text value. All right. So I can tell it to go and do that same sort of thing here. So now my names will be condo 501, 502, 503, all the way through there. So the sequential numbering tool, by the way, it doesn't have to be selected. I only have it selected so I can see those numbers each time. I don't have to reselect them, but it will go through any polygon that I run that thread through. It will go and change this so that this one will now have that new value in here, which was the next sequential one, 507. All right. The sequential numbering tool is a really nice tool, sort of replaces the old snake pin tool if you ever use that in ORMAP. It's the same sort of concept, except you can put formatting in here. And
Frank, is
Go
that
ahead.
a pro tool or is it in the Fabric?
Pro.
Excellent.
90% of these tools are pro tools. They have nothing to do with the Fabric. These are just and I have to reinforce this again. Esri has done an unbelievable job at taking all of these edit tools that we used to have in MAP, rethinking them, making them better, and putting them as standard tools inside of ArcGIS Pro. And it's only the ones that are doing some really, really specialized things that they are really parcel fabric tools. These are just standard tools inside of Pro. So you can use that anywhere you want inside of Pro. Okay.
Thanks, Frank. That was really cool. I've used that linearly, but not vertically. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing you want to, on this one here is the formatting, so that this is a formatting option. So if I go and put not just one place, but I say 3 places, it will actually go and pad the values that get stored here so that it fits out to 3 decimal places. So I'm going to go and do this. And if I get to 990, if I get to 99, if I get to 10, all right, it will continue to go and move forward. The older snake pin, you could only do 1 to 9, and then 10 to 99, and then 100 to 999. This will let you keep doing as long as you've set the formatting correctly, and it will pad it if it's less than that. So if, for example, I start with 1 here, as I'm going through this and I'm saying, okay, let's start here and go to here. All right, and watch it go and do these. It will start 001 because it's padding that formatting out to 3 decimal places. 3 significant places. So it will allow me to go and do it and continue to go beyond 10 and 100, and it lets me keep going as I'm going. This tool, they did a really good job with this tool here. On here. Unfortunately, it's only 1 at a time, 1 field at a time, but even so, it's so much nicer than what it was before. All right, and I'm sorry again, I went down a rabbit hole because I started talking about vertical and condominiums, and I wanted to show you how you can actually go and, even without the parcel fabric, you can go and map condominiums inside of ArcGIS Pro to go and reinforce that vertical duplicate. I can't find it. Vertical, duplicate vertical is not a parcel fabric tool. It is an ArcGIS Pro tool.
So
Yes, Dee.
Frank, this is good. What I'm gonna do is share this part of the video with the tools committee. And if there are any folks that have been, watch this piece and want condos, we are going to be starting that effort shortly. So please email me and I'll get you connected up with John. But Clackamas is going to be looking at this pretty hard from what John tells me in the coming month. I assume by what we've been talking about that probably Washington and Multnomah will also. So again, that is a design issue the tools committee is going to look at. So
Yeah.
no, this is good stuff. Thank you.
And like I said, and we're going a little bit deeper into this at 3.1, Esri is really thinking about this and recognizing that if you're doing this in a parcel fabric, not only do you want to know the polygon configuration of these actual units, but you want to know what lines were used to build those vertical condominiums. So they're attributing the polygons as far as the floor level, but then they're also attributing the lines, so you can see what lines go with what polygons, what units, and the lines that we use to create them. Again, a little bit more complexity built in, but we have had some of our clients that are building condominiums in Pro without the parcel fabric and building them in Pro with 2.9 even in there. So it's possible. It just depends upon how complex a model you're going to use for that. So good. Again, I'm glad that we went on that rabbit hole, but sorry, I get distracted sometime. Create seeds. This is, in fact, we've gone through this a couple times. It goes and checks through the lines that are associated with that record, and will go and give you an indicator that, in fact, you have closed areas, and it will build a polygon for those closed areas. As we demonstrated in that first demonstration, those lines don't have to be snapped to ends. It doesn't have to split the lines. It doesn't have to do anything. It just has to form a closed area, and it will put a seed there for you. So what happens, and I get this question often, if I have a record, correct, and I go in there and I create some seeds on here, let's be, and I create some seeds in here. I think I'm on the fringes of your data. I also have labeling turned on. So I've gone and created this. And let's say that this was a roadway area. And I create the seeds on here. I don't want to label those. I want to create the seeds. So we have a client that when they're modeling this, they want to model not just the parcel, but they want to show reversionary rights. If in fact that right of way gets abandoned or vacated in any way, and actually some of their deeds actually go to the center line of the road, but it says subject to the existing road right of way. So what they do is they want these parcel lines to go to the center line, and then, but they don't want to actually create a tax parcel for that area which is out in the roadway. So if you go and create the lines as part of the record, and you create a seed, when it builds the seed, it will go and create that polygon, and those lines will be associated with, to the point where if I go and say select things that are part of this record, it will go and select them and show you that those lines are part of that record, but it doesn't create that parcel there. If I were to go and say create seeds again, it would put it there, but they're not looking for that polygon to be out there. They just want those lines in there. And again, this is part of that flexibility of the parcel fabric as far as how it works and how it's used sometimes. There's a great deal of flexibility in the way you implement it and the way you utilize it. Interesting, isn't it? Isn't it that you can use it that way and actually show the dimensions all the way out to that, in this case, road center line on here without actually building the polygon out there. You can do that. We'll see how sharp any of you are, because that violates one of the topology rules. The topology rule says that the lines have to be on the boundaries of a polygon, and there is no polygon here. So it's a violation of a topology rule, but this client decided that's the way they want to represent this, and that's the way they want their parcels mapped, not just the parcel that's outside the right of way, but also they want to show the lines inside there. Interesting component.
So Frank, so going back to that too, isn't it so like those are delineated in the tax lot lines? You just basically remove the seed out of that for the street right of way. Is it possible instead, so that you don't violate those rules, just move those lines to like a different layer where it wouldn't be within the where it wouldn't have to deal with the topology from that point?
So you could go and move them into, for example, in this case, this client actually has a road polygon.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to split it up into these individual segments of the roads yet, because they just wanted to show sort of future. They wanted it for the dimensions. They wanted it for future type of maybe vacation on there. They wanted their road to be solid. We could have moved it over to the road lines and still made it part of this record. Yes, but it still is a violation. If it's in the parcel fabric, a line is not supposed to be in the parcel fabric unless
Okay.
unless it's associated with a polygon.
Got it.
With one exception. If it was a connection line.
Lines.
Connection
Got it.
lines are not associated with polygons, they are associated with records. So if in fact we had copied this into, let's turn on connection lines, let's sort of show this. If we had gone and taken these lines and gone to edit and said, cut
Copy
these
and paste.
lines and then paste them into, paste special into connection lines. Yeah, we would have them there and they would not be a violation of this. They would still be associated with that record. Okay, these lines are still associated with that record. If I go in here.
Yeah.
They're still associated with the record on here. Sorry, created by is still associated with it. But again, it's not a violation now of the topology rules. So there are ways to get around it. They didn't want to go and have to display all the connection lines in here. But again, there's flexibility in the way this is implemented and put out there.
Okay, that sounds great. I know from our side, we just have a streets layer with street lines and historic. So we just move some right-of-way stuff and adjustments like that over to that whenever we need to. So it's like doing like moving it to a different parcel layer. But
yeah, so
I get
the
that.
only difference with that is that if you were to move it into a non-parcel fabric feature class, unless you have the created by record attribute, it's going to lose that attribute and you're not going to have it associated with this.
Right.
And you're not going to be able to do a search. It only will search the parcel types that are inside the parcel fabric.
Correct.
When you do show all the features associated with it. All
So
right.
this is Jeff in Washington County again. Lately, when doing road dedications, I've been splitting the parent parcel and then setting the part that's in the road historic.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
that way I have it there in the historic record and it seems to work.
That's an interesting way of doing it, actually.
So there is a tool, and we don't have a separate feature class here for that. But what I'm going to do is I'll do it here. All right. I'll use my lots as roads and demonstrate another tool that's in 3.0 and above. And that let me go and create a new record just in case here. So we can do this. And I'll go in here and I will create, and by the way, I'm going to take these lot polygons and I'm actually going to call these lots. All right, I'm going to call these lot lines. Show you a little bit more of how the sausage is made. All right, note I still have parcel and parcel lines and parcel lines in here. I'm going to go to manage my templates. And I'm going to go to my lots and I'm going to tell it delete that old template and create a new template for what I just created. And it now says lot lines. Same thing with my polygons. I'm going to tell it to create a new one for the lots. Drives me crazy. So let's do this and create a new feature template for these so they're reflective of what they really are. And let's close out our manage templates. So now I can see that I'm creating lot polygons and I'm creating lot lines and such. All right, so I'm just going to go and build a road here. All right, I'm going to build a road. Done with the road, I'm going to go and, because this is a parcel fabric, I'm going to go and build my road polygon. Again, I'm just a little bit of imagination. I'm building a road polygon in here. I now have lines. I have everything I want in there. There is a new tool inside of 3 that allows me to go and transfer parcels. So I can transfer parcels and it will go and do multiple things for me. So in this case, I'm going to take this parcel and I'm going to take this road and I'm going to abandon it. And it's going to tell me, okay, here's the road that's being abandoned. All right. Now it's going to say, what parcel do you want clipped? And I can tell it I can clip this one. All right, that one there. I can clip that one. And then which parcel do I want it to be added to? In this case, I want it to add to those. So this is where this is getting abandoned. And suddenly these parcels have the right to have that right away now. So now it will go and process that through. It's a transferring of the parcels. Let's turn off the historic in here so we can actually see the results. You see what happened? It went and took and clipped that polygon that I had built, that parcel, that road parcel, and clipped it out of this one. So it could have been clipped out of a road polygon. And then it added it to the adjoiners here and changed their parcel definition to go all the way out into the road. Now, if you note, it actually prorated and extended these lines out so that it correctly went and made the sort of the allocations to those individual parcels as it went along. So Jeff, is that one of the ways that you were thinking of doing this?
Well, that'd work, but I'm actually doing dedications where I'm taking parts out of the lots and putting them into the roads.
Ah,
So that's what we call a road dedication, where we're taking a piece out of the lot and putting it into the road. And that way I can see by setting it historic, I can turn on the historic and see how much of that lot is in the road now. Was my thought.
so the way I just demonstrated, it just showed you where it was taking it and clipping it between the two. I could have reversed the way I described that.
Right.
And it was exactly, so this was the lot, this is the road you were taking out.
Yeah.
And so that transfer parcels tool allows you to do exactly that. And it will go and modify what's left there. And it does the same thing.
Yeah.
You have those 3 options. Here's the road that's getting moved. Here's
Right.
what it's getting clipped out of. Here's what it's going and being appended into. So you have those options to go and use that tool however you want.
Yeah. Right now at this point, we don't have a road type in our parcel fabric.
Yep.
Because we think of it as the negative area between our parcels. So that would take some work to change that.
But just be aware that I didn't have to make it a road type. I could have made it just a parcel. And it still would work. It would do the same thing. It's a
Right.
way to go and distribute that polygon to the adjoiners. Experiment with it. It's only available in 3.0 and above, but experiment with it. It's a way to go and take and distribute it. Originally, the design was that it was for annexations, so that you could annex a parcel into a municipality and
okay.
delete it out of another one. That was the original one, but they recognized there were more use cases as they moved through this a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll have to keep that in mind when we move to 3.1 in fall.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, three. Okay. So create seeds. Just go back through this. Shrink to seeds. Careful with this. It works a little bit better in 3 than 2.9. But the problem is if you shrink it to seeds, unless you've actually selected the record, when you go to rebuild it, it doesn't know what's part of it. And so there's issues. This one's a little early. Reconstruct from seed will allow you to go and build a parcel if you have a seed with lines that are not part of that record. Again, a little bit on here. If you have a parcel and you delete it, just be aware that using the delete parcels tool will delete not just the polygon, but it will also delete associated lines that are related to that parcel. But, and this is important, muy importante, it doesn't delete the record, because the logic behind that is that the record might actually have more than just a parcel in it. It might have easements, might have subdivisions, might have lots, might have other parcels. So it doesn't necessarily delete the record. There's a one-to-many relate, but it will delete the parcel and delete the lines associated with that parcel that you have selected. Okay. So we were talking about record-driven workflows, and I apologize for this jumping all over, but we were talking about record-driven workflows and how when you have a record, it goes and tracks things that you create, tracks things that you quote delete on here. But this is a tool which is not record-driven. This is a tool that's quality-driven. It's used for fixing things up. And let me see if I can find something. So, Dean's mapping is so good. Here we go. This is good. We use this as an example. Let's say that this happened to be a short segment that should not be there. All right. This tool, which is on the quality-driven workflow, allows me to go and here it is here, merge points, allows me to go and select merge points, allows me to go and draw a box. Come on, it's lagging here. Draw a box between it, will identify the points that I have gone and created or selected, and then allows me to say, well, which one will I go to? If I go to 1, this is what it will look like. If I go to 2, come on, let it go and show me. This is what it will look like. So it allows me to go and merge these points together. And when it does, it goes and replaces this line and takes this point and eliminates it and replaces everything over to that one point.
Why can't you just delete it?
Why can't you delete a point? Because every time, let's go in and demonstrate that. If I go and select this one point, if I select this one point and delete it, all right, and there's the point. And let's go and, where is that point? So let's select the point and delete it. All right. I'm left with 2 lines that maybe I can take that line and let's select this and now unselect these other areas and just have that one line here. I could go and delete that and then have to redraw this. Here's the problem. The parcel fabric remembers what was used to build this, and it knows that there's a vertex at the polygon there. so that when I go and rebuild and revalidate all the rules inside the parcel fabric, it's going to put it back again. So only by doing this merge points that I convince the parcel fabric, oh, this actually, I'm moving that vertex. All right, I'm moving the vertex on here. Let's go in, and this is moving slow right now. I don't know what's happening here. Merge points, it's going to go merge it to one, merge it all into one. And we'll go and take that point, eliminate the point, and extend the line so that when I go back and tell it to go ahead and rebuild this area to check and see, there is no point there. There are no two lines. There's one line in there. Somebody better ask the next couple questions.
So could you have merged the lines and deleted the point?
Could have merged the lines and deleted the point, yes. However, merged lines, I have to be careful whether or not it's merging them or marking them as historic. Okay. The
What's
question I
that
was
do to
waiting
the
for.
Kogo attributes?
That's what I was asking. That's what I was waiting for somebody to ask. The answer is it does not automatically recalculate the Kogo attributes. So just be aware of that. This is not to be used for big area or big lines. This is to be used for things like 1/10 of a foot or something like that, where you've just got a mapping or something where topology had introduced something in there, or, it's just careful with that. It does not, the merge points does not recalculate Kogo on here. All right. So just be aware of that.
So that gets rid of the vertices in the polygon and in the line?
Yep, it redefines it. Yep. So by the way, one more point here. So if I mark something as historic, it does not delete that line. It leaves it in the database. And so that when I rebuild the extent, the point is still there because it has that each line, all lines, whether they are current lines or connected to a historic line, they still have to have a point on them. So it's still going to have a point, even though something is historic. And just to demonstrate that, if I go back over here, where I was before, sorry, here, over in here. See these? Those are from historic points. If I turn on my historic here, there's points in here that I had marked historic and things that I had marked historic that I don't want to merge points on here. I just want my attributes. See, these points were never part of the created by, so they didn't have actually records associated with them. But yeah, points themselves, if it's created correctly, should actually have a record associated with it, and it will determine if you have a historic parcel. It's still going to show the points on them. All right, just be aware of that. Merge boundaries is a tool that often people will say, well, how if I merge the boundaries? And what the merge boundaries is doing is basically looking at the sequential lines and seeing what the offset is on them, not checking to see if there's a bearing or anything, but seeing what the offset is. And if it's within a tolerance of an offset, it will go and merge them together into a single line. It doesn't work as well as merge point does. Just be aware of that. Simplify by straight lines and curves. This is sort of a batch way of taking and doing the align features on here. it works, but it's really tricky as far as all of these settings, whether or not you're creating curves, what the offsets are, whether you've got a minimum radius or maximum radius. We'll use this often cleaning people's data to bring into the parcel fabric to try to eliminate extraneous vertices. But sometimes it will take straight lines that are between curves and extend the curve through them. So just be aware there's nuances on here that you may or may not want to do. Reconstruct boundaries. This is an interesting tool inside of here. Let's see if I can find an area here. So let's go and label this, see if we have COGO values on here. I don't see any COGO values in here. Let's take these lines and calculate update COGO on them. And let's actually cheat and mark those as entered. All right. So here's what's traditionally would be a backlot. And the reality is for this parcel here, this should not be split. This should be one line from here to here. And then this should have its own on here. Inside 3.0, there is actually, you see here, there is, actually have to take those parcels. And there is reconstruct boundaries. What reconstruct boundaries will do is it will go and analyze the lines. And if in fact I have two lines here that are within the tolerance, it will add those lines up and calculate what the overall single line is. Give me this one here. So it will label these in solving what is traditionally called the backlot area, backlot problem on there. By the way, this is telling me this was from geometry. This is actually entered values. And if you see a plus or minus before it, that means that it was computed. All right, so this reconstruct boundaries is available in 3.x, and it requires a version 5 of Parcel Fabric, but it allows you to go and use labels much more intelligently than what we used to do. So it's a nice tool. It goes in sets, for example, whether or not the overall length of a lot is one single line or whether it's multiple lines. It will go and create a new replacement line for it associated with the correct record. And it'll go and add up and sum the total value of the COGO values. It will also determine whether or not there's a corresponding polygon adjacent to it that has the same line. And that's what this is. And it's giving you a shared line and only having that label in there one time and setting it up so that it is on the line. Otherwise, it's telling you here that there's a different value here from whatever was value there. This one is shared between here. This label is just for this line, and this label is for this polygon here. So it's at 3, this reconstruct boundary, and there's also a geoprocessing tool called set label side. It's starting to go and evaluate and be better at labeling so that you can use this. I know I'm going to get yelled at. use it to replace annotation. All right. So let's enter into that territory. Okay. We had a question here earlier this morning when we started this about annotation. Whether annotation was in the parcel fabric, how to go and feature linked annotation and such. All right. Let's start with this. I'm not a big fan of annotation. I think that I know that there's a reason why we have it, especially from a cartography standpoint. We want to be able to place this better. And in many instances, labeling can still not fully replace anno. I know that. But I still struggle. I'm a data guy. I'm not a map guy. So the annotation is not part of the parcel fabric. It is not a part of the parcel fabric at all. You can go and implement annotation alongside a parcel fabric, but it is not part of the parcel fabric. It is, you can make it ArcGIS Pro, and you can create ArcGIS Pro specific annotation, which, by the way, is not readable in ArcMap. You can make ArcGIS Pro specific annotation so that when you put a piece of annotation, and it will read a COGO value and use that COGO value to go and populate what that annotation reads. Matter of fact, we've got a client, Waukesha County, that they didn't want to use labels because they couldn't control them, but they wanted annotation that was smarter than just simple pieces of text that they'd have to go and have a user go and input the values for that anno. So we came up with a solution that when they go and place their anno, it automatically goes and, using an arcade intersect, goes and finds the closest line, pulls the COGO value out of that, and uses that, depending upon whether it's a line or a curve, and uses that in the text string of the anno. And attribute rule also goes and calculates what the angle is so that it automatically resets the angle for them. So it kind of is like, in ArcInfo, we used to have, what was it called? Something driven anno, where you could tell it to go and pull the values out of a certain feature and store that as your anno. And we've implemented that with annotation. It's not necessarily feature linked, but it does that. You can feature link annotation inside of the parcel fabric. However, the difference is that annotation cannot be linked to the object ID of the feature. It has to be linked to the global ID of the feature. So answer a bunch of questions. Yes, you can feature link anno to the parcel fabric. It must be linked to the global ID and not the object ID. And otherwise that it will still work exactly as it does in standard. You can have it pull it. It will pull those same values in and create that anno for you automatically on there. And then you can determine where to place it. Set it up exactly as you would in a non-parcel fabric. And this is why Dean came on. Dean and I have this discussion. I have clients that have an enterprise, which is a web-enabled implementation, and they have hundreds of thousands of pieces of anno, and they've experienced and reported to me and to Esri that this anno, when you're using it with web services, is extremely slow. It's laggy. Dean has told me he's got this implementation on enterprise, and he doesn't experience that. So just be aware that anno is very chatty back and forth to the server. and it sometimes will appear to be slow in nature. All right, I think I'm done talking for a minute about Anodine. Go ahead.
So one thing everybody should be aware of is that converting feature linked ANO from ArcMap to Pro is problematic. Robin and I, Columbia County, she's in the class. Robin and I tried to develop a clean process to do this. I spent a lot of time. I could not make it work. We got so that we could run feature linked ANO afterwards just fine, but the actual conversion and have it work properly, and that was, we were using the ANO for tax lot acre and tax lot number. That was not a good thing. The second thing is that we do have a series of tools for annotation that will actually let you, and I'll show you those on next week, that will let you place annotation and it will grab it, as Frank said, from the nearby line. And if you're implementing that with the historic data, we've got arcades that will grab the correct line from the current feature select, and rather than from a historic line. So there's or we have a tool that will generate the annotation for all lines in a subdivision based on a labeling mechanism that you decide. Frank, there's just, just in thinking about that since the last time we argued about this, is that
Discuss. We didn't argue. We just discussed.
Okay, discussed. Is that when my cartographers are putting annotation on, it's their representation of record when they grab that.
Yeah.
And obviously, as time goes on, lines in that area can change and everything else. But so if they were using labels, unless they made sure that that line also continued with its original bearing and distance, length, so forth, primarily the lengths, the labels would go away, if you will. And they don't want those labels to go away. They want those labels to stay to basically as a reference back to the original record. And I think that's probably, other than just the cartographic experience that my cartographers like, I think that's the biggest issue, is that I can have if I'm using labeling, I can have annotation there today, and that annotation might be gone tomorrow, just based on the line, what I did with the line work, and I don't necessarily want that. So those are comments, and as you all know in the class, there's been a lot of discussion over the years about what we should do with annotation, and I don't want to get into that, but I'm sure if anybody wants to discuss it, those are some of the reasons that we came up with last class, so that we don't have to spend a lot of time repeating stuff. So with that, I'll turn it back over to anybody else who wants to comment.
Any comments on ANO? Nope. So by the way, one other thing, just build upon something that Dean said. The Kogo type values, you can actually set it so that you don't use labels unless in fact it's entered, so that if it is from geometry or if it is computed, you don't show the labels. So there are options in here, but I understand this is extremely personal. This is one of those things where you've got issues. To build on what Dean first said, taking existing ANO that's feature linked and migrating it into the parcel fabric is extremely problematic, because ArcMap feature linked annotation is tied to the object ID of the individual feature classes. ArcGIS Pro is tied to the global ID. And as you're migrating it in, it's basically assigning new object IDs to those features that were being feature linked before. So now you have to recalc what the original one is, what the new one is, and then converted over to the new global IDs. So there's a lot of issues associated with that. It is really a problem. It's a real, besides the fact that there's a structural change between ORMAP Anno and ArcGIS Pro Anno, there's also this whole issue of feature link and how you're going to bring it in there. Let me go and just add one more. There's also an issue between ArcGIS Pro 2.9 Anno and ArcGIS Pro 3.x Anno. There's another change in there that occurs so that 2.9 Anno is not, it has to be upgraded to 3.x. It's like, why do you do this, Esri? Why do you do this to us? But that's it. That's where we're at right now. Okay. Any other discussion? So I forget who it was that actually asked that question on Anno. Did we answer your question on that well enough? Josh, I know, was up there, and I think that yeah. Anyway, hopefully we answered it. Yep. Thank you, Josh. Yeah. So we're coming up on 10 minutes to noon here. We can look at more topics. Is there any discussion about what we talked about so far, or anything that's unclear? Or do you want me to go in and with another topic, or do you want to? Or is the sponge full? Are we done for today? Tell me. Where are we at here?
So this is Viola, by the way. So I'm presuming that we're probably next week we're going to just get to some implementation. I know I have a lot of questions that we've been dealing with regards to like adjusting like old to new or new to old, as far as like some of the like traverses and things like that. Once again, that'll probably just happen next week. And I guess the other question that, and so like I'll probably ask more at that point, but I guess the other question I had was when we were looking at the aligned parcels and aligned features, the one thing that like sort of stressed me out a little bit about it was the fact that I kept staring at that one at the like actually you'd have the square, right? And you would like basically slightly be over this way and they would just sort of squat it down. And I was still trying to figure out a way to actually continue and maintain the shapes and the angles when I would do an aligned parcel. It just doesn't seem like I can do that, or it's not there. You'd have to just do your best to rotate it into place first and then align it.
So we are going to go over that. However, I am going to use a different data set, only because and I know this is set up great for you guys, but I want to make sure this is a pure Parcel Fabric data set that doesn't have any, that I know everything that's set on there. I'm going to use a different data set for next week, just so I make sure that I'm comfortable with it and we know everything is going on. This will be available for certain functions, but not all of the alignments and adjustments component of it. Yes, we are going to go over those next week, though. All right.
Okay, that sounds good. Other than that, I actually make it sound like ArcGIS Pro 3.0 is sort of exciting to move to, as far as some of the things that are available. So
yeah,
at least that sounds seems like to me.
Yeah, we have almost exclusively moved to 3.0. It's just a matter of what the organization looks like.
Yeah,
I sort of to give you some insights, we at Panda, we actually use virtual machines on everything. So I literally have a virtual machine that's running Windows 11 with 3.x, the latest version of it. I have one that's running Windows 10 with ORMAP 10.8. I actually have a virtual machine that is running Windows 7 and ORMAP 8.3. Because I still have a client that has that type of implementation. So I just have virtual machines for almost everything. But just to let you know, that's sort of the way we run it as a consultant. That's what we have to do.
Perfect.
Just to test everything out. We also just, as an aside, we run everything on Apple Macintoshes so that everything gets virtualized. We don't have any real Windows computers in any of our individual offices. We all run off of Apple computers. So I'm going to assume that we're good here. Do we have any other questions on what we went over today? Does everybody have enough for Tuesday's homework? Remember, it could be something you learned in the first session or something you learned in the second session. It's just something that you learned and you found interesting, you're going to implement or want to talk about some more. All right. Again, it's mostly just to start this discussion is what it's for. Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, and this might be more for Dean, but I'm a little concerned with the annotation change from ArcMap to Pro, which is fine. We've done that, but then an annotation change from 2.9 to 3x. Are we going to have? I mean, we've gone through Dean's conversion. We've converted our data. It's still a sample data set, but it's our data to 2.9. Are we going to have an issue converting all our base data from ArcMap to 3x?
I could actually answer that.
Yeah.
The answer is no. It is remember we talked about the issues from 2.9 and 3.0. It primarily is how the database is stored and how certain elements in that database are stored. It's the same thing with Anno. They store it differently. From a user standpoint, you never see the difference. You don't see the difference, in here. It just depends upon what application you're using to go and run it. Just know that once you upgrade to 3.x Anno, you can't go back because it won't be able to read it in 2.9. But once you understand that, there's no difference. You don't even see a difference. It's just the fact of how it's stored. And you notice that yesterday when you saw me trying to open some 3.0 projects, I could see the data, but I couldn't work with it and I couldn't go and actually look at the attribute rules. It just stores it differently, so it doesn't know how to interpret it. So Dean, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would, Scott, is that in the sample data set we made, it's just we can have that discussion. You're just gonna go to each layer and do the update data set. It's just a simple tool to go. The bigger issue is for your GIS guys that are going to be implementing SDE, branch versioning, and so forth. And what we are doing here and have made that decision just because of the potential headaches, and that the next round on the SDE or the enterprise world has so many better management tools. We're actually waiting to do our full implementation until after 3.1 is out and fully tested. So we just said, hey, we're going to wait a few months, make sure it's all in go, and then we only have to do it once, and then we're consistent rather than doing a double bump. It's just and it's not my issue. Eric, who is our, he's our GIS coordinator, and he's responsible for all the server stuff. It's a big lift on the server side, on the enterprise side. And so getting that all, and the new tools in 11, from what he tells me, I don't do any of that stuff. I just say, give me the data. It works a whole lot better there. So my suggestion is make sure you're all tight and set to go. Test out the 3.1 tools as they come on board, but try to look at your production scheduling as an 11 enterprise with 3.1 rather than doing it a double hit. And it just is easier from that perspective. Again, better tools, get everybody, and I don't know if it's going to be possible for you all to move everybody at once, but again, Eric has just decided that, as long as we're going to move, we're all going to move at once. And that's a systems decision. And I think those, as you're playing around and as you're talking with the GIS folks, that's a huge discussion to have, which has nothing to do with this class, but I bring it up because it also is for everybody else. Realize that as you're seeing 3.1 stuff and go, I want to test it, the virtual machine with a 3.1 version or a 3.0 version, so you can play with sample data sets, great. But if you're talking about, well, we got to move all of our enterprise stuff to the next version, that's a lift. And I would suggest talking to ESRI about some of that sort of stuff, getting some advice. We have been Eric and I have been talking about getting the enterprise folks together for a few hours just to talk about these issues. And frankly, other than doing introductions, I don't care. And I assume that you don't either. You know, you want your maps and you want access to your maps, you want to edit. And it needs to be there. And when you finish, it needs to connect with the A&T stuff and all that. So, but just realize there's a lot of stuff for those folks to do. That's all I got to add.
Okay, thank you. Good question, Scott. Thank you all. With that, I'm going to stop the recording